Okay, so this class is going to go over macros and how you can create macros. The examples that I'm going to use are going to be to email, basically email macros. That's probably, we could do an email macro, and we can also, well, an email macro where it emails a report, and an email macro where it's just a text macro. So let's go ahead and get started. The first thing that I always like to explain to people is whenever you're talking about an email macro, you have to determine if you want the macro to be sent on the user's computer or from the server. Okay, so the reason why you need to distinguish between that is because whenever you set up, so I logged in as administrator here, and if I would have logged in as myself and I would want the emails to run from the individual user's computer, then what we need to do is we need to make sure we've set up our email options underneath setup, user options, and then email options. Okay, so right now, depending on what option we have selected here, if it's Outlook or internal, what the Outlook option is going to do is it's going to open up Outlook whenever we try to send something, just like it does probably now whenever you send an email or an estimate. If we use the internal method, it's going to send directly from control. And these settings right here control what the individual user's email does. Now, if we want to change it for the server, so let's say we want to run something off of the server, we need to set up the user options for the server. And the place that we go to set up those are going to be setup, system setup. So remember, anything that affects the entire system is going to be under system setup. Something that affects the individual user is going to be under user options. So if we go to system setup and then we go to email options, it's going to look the same as the user options, except this one right here, anytime we have something emailing through the server, it's going to use these options. So once again, we have the options of Outlook and internal. Now, if we use Outlook, what's going to happen is if you don't have someone sitting at your server, the Outlook is going to start flashing, and no one's going to be there to click the button and allow it maybe 5, 10 minutes, whatever, and click OK. So that email is never going to be sent. Okay, so if you're emailing something out of the server and no one sits at the server, no one actually uses the server as a computer, it's maybe your server is a computer in a closet somewhere, or maybe it's upstairs where no one actually uses it, you're going to have to change this to internal and then fill in these options here. That's probably the number one question, or the number one issue that comes up as far as macros are concerned. Okay. So let's go ahead and I'll close these two screens, and we'll start from the home page. So we want to create a macro. Let's first create a macro that sends an invoice to a customer whenever the order is marked sale. So we mark an order sale. We want the invoice to automatically be sent to the customer. Okay. So what we're going to do is at the very top, we're going to click on Marketing Home. Okay, and then we're going to click on Macro Setup. Okay, and over to the left, this email that we're going to do is going to send whenever an order is marked sale. So this is going to be an order macro. Okay, and we're going to click on New Macro. So what we need to do is fill in the macro name. So invoice is emailed when marked sale. Okay, and if you want to give some more details, you can in this description. Sometimes I get a little elaborate there. Okay, so a macro is basically kind of like a cause and effect. Whenever X happens, you want Y to happen. So X is going to cause Y to happen. Okay, so trigger, that's what's going to trigger. That's what's going to cause the macro to actually fire. So the main options that we have is we can either run this macro automatically, or the second option, see how they have the radio button? The second radio button is to run this macro manually or on a schedule. So let's just go over those two options. Run this macro automatically. So let's say every time a new order is created, you want something to happen. Every time a payment is entered, you want something to happen. Anytime you want something to automatically happen and you don't want to have someone do anything with the system, it's going to be run this macro automatically. So anytime an order station gets changed to invoiced, then you want the macro to fire. Anytime an order is voided, you want a macro to fire. That's whenever you would use this option up here, run this macro automatically. The second option is run this macro manually or on a schedule. Let's kind of break that apart into two sections. Let's just think about run this macro manually. What that means is, let's say every time I mark an order sale, I have 50% of my customers that want me to mail them an invoice, and then 50% that want me to email them an invoice. So if that's the way your customers are, what I would do is I probably would not have the macro automatically run. I would probably set it to run this macro manually or on a schedule. And what that does is it gives the user the option to run the macro or not to run the macro. So it would only run if you said that you wanted to run it on this particular order. That's the first part, run this macro manually. The second part is run this macro on a schedule. So a schedule is maybe instead of during the day, let's say on average we probably mark 15 orders sale in a day, okay? Instead of one invoice going out every time we mark an order sale, what some people do is they'll set up a macro that runs at night, and they'll say any invoice marked sale today. So what it'll do is every night, maybe at 9 o'clock, it'll fire the macro, and the macro will go through and look at any order marked sale and then mail that and then email that invoice out. Okay? So we have automatically, manually, and on a schedule. And the option down here that says also allow this macro to appear in the menu and be manually run for an individual. That is, it's almost the same as this macro, run the macro manually. It allows you to decide whether or not you want to run it on an individual order. There's really not a reason why you can't select this all the time unless you don't ever want someone to run this on an individual order. I typically select it just in case you ever want to do that, you ever come across that. Okay, the macro that we're going to talk about one that is run automatically, but I can also show you, once I do the one run automatically, I can also go in and show you how to schedule this one. So the option, this is the section that we're dealing with then, since we selected this run this macro automatically. The first option is, do you want to run on the server in the background? So that goes back to what I was telling at the very beginning. Do we want this invoice, do we want the email to be sent from the user's computer? So what that means is, let's say there's 5 different people in accounting, okay? And each person has their own email address. And today I go in and I mark an order sale, and then Susie goes in and she marks an order sale. Well, what's going to happen is, if we don't have that option checked, the email is going to be sent, one's going to be sent from me, one's going to be sent from Susie, and maybe the other ones are going to be sent from other accounting folks. Okay? If we have the option checked, then everything is going to be sent from the server. So it's going to automatically be sent from the server, and everyone, all of those emails are going to come from the same email address. That's basically the difference. Run on the server in the background, that just means, do you want it to run on the individual user or on the server? Okay, let's say we want this to run on the server because we don't want the box to pop up every time we have to email something. So we're going to run it on the server. Okay, so the triggering event, we have 2 options, order change event or an indirect change event. So an order change event is one of these things here, new order, order edit, status change, station change, payment, and we can also select anytime the order status changes to, so that's the one we're going to select. Anytime our order status changes to sale, we want our macro to fire. Now an indirect change event basically looks like a blank field here. What this really is you have to write a SQL query. So anytime you want to do complex macros where maybe you're looking at multiple things, you would have to do an indirect change event. That's something that implementation would have to help you with, because those are typically more advanced ones and they can be really different. But that's just the one you would use, the order change event, because we're just looking for the status change to sale. Okay, and we'll come back and I'll change this to use this one at the bottom. So now that we know what's going to trigger our macro, we're going to go to the Actions tab. And this is where we say, okay, whenever the order is marked sale, this is where we tell it what we want control to do. So we want control to email a report. Now, this is where I could see someone getting mixed up. There's an option that says email macro. If I click on email macro and I add it, one thing that you'll notice is that you can't select which report you want. So in this one right here, you're not sending a report. This is just if you want to send text to someone. What we want to do is we want to send out that report. So we're going to click on Report Macro Crystal. Okay, I'm going to add this one. And we don't want the prompt to begin. This is the second place where macros, people get confused with macros. Since we have this macro running on the server, if we had a prompt to begin, the macro isn't going to fire until someone clicks OK on the prompt. Well, because our server is probably in a closet somewhere that no one uses, if control pops up a box that says, are you sure you want to run this macro, yes or no, if no one's there to click yes, then the macro is not going to fire. So on this particular macro, we don't want this option, so we're going to delete this. And we're also going to delete the notification of completion, because no one's there to see the notification either, so we'll delete that one. And we'll delete the email macro, because that was just, I just wanted to show you the difference between the email and the report macro. So on the report macro, we can go in and we can change this option right here to say email invoice maybe. Save record of completion when executed. So what this is going to do is, let's say order 123 was marked to sale. If we want this to show on the Activities tab of that order, we're going to check the box. Okay, print report as group. In this particular case, this right here wouldn't really do anything. This is more along the lines of if you're sending out your monthly statements. So let's say you have 50 customers that owe you a balance. Okay, so your statement is 50 pages long. If for whatever reason, and I don't know why anyone would really want to do this, but print report as group, if you want to send all 50 pages to each individual customer with an outstanding balance, that's whenever you would check that option. The only time that would really be good is, let's say you do work for Cracker Barrel, okay, and you do work for 50 different Cracker Barrel stores or Walmarts or whatever a big franchise or store similar to that is. You may want to send them all of the statements for their companies. That's really the only way that particular option would be helpful. Because print as group, more than likely you don't want to send one customer someone else's statement. So more than likely this is going to be unchecked. That's why it's there as default. Menu item name, this is just invoice email. Okay, we can put a description also. Security rights, you can link this to a security right if you wanted to. In this case, we're not going to. Print option, we want this to quick email. Okay, because remember, this is running on the server. There's not going to be someone at that computer, so we don't need to preview it. We don't want to save it. We just want to email it. Okay, so our file location, we have the choice between if we want to email the customer an OneDrive report or a system report. Normally, most customers use the standard report, so we'll click on System Report, and then we'll click the drop down here. We're going to go down to Orders _ Invoice Master 01, and that's our standard invoice. So Order _ Invoice Master 01. We're going to click on the Options tab. Okay. We're not printing this, so we're going to email. Now we probably want the invoice to go to the company's accounting contact, so the billing contact for the company. Okay, and we may want to CC the, let's say we may want to CC the order contact. So we would do order contact email address. And you may want to BCC maybe your salesperson or something like that. So we'll click on order salesperson 1 email address. And these are optional. You don't have to do these. You know, you can do whatever it is you want. So I'll do ABC signs invoice, and then I'll put the invoice number behind it. Order number. Okay, so that's a merge field. So that's, I'm sorry, that's what this option right here is. These are all your available merge fields. So you may want to type in a message, and you can copy and paste in here. We could do, dear customer, thank you for your recent purchase. Recent purchase. And you can do all this and then type in your company name here and your contact and all that. Anything you want to type in, that's just a message field. Okay? And then we want to send the report as an attachment, and we probably want, so up here we put in the subject for the email. We may want to do the same thing for the file name. So this is ABC Signs Invoice. And then merge field the order number. Okay, and if you wanted to, you can even put the description behind it. Okay, so now that we've filled in our email information, we can go down to these options down here. So do we want to show the customer's AP contact? So these are the same options that you currently see on your invoice. So you would just go through here and you would uncheck the ones that you don't want the customer to see. It's the same thing that you currently have on your reports, and then that's it. So after this, we would save this. And what's going to happen is anytime we go through and mark an order sale, this email is going to fire, the invoice is going to fire. Now if we wanted to, we could change this macro for it to run on a schedule. Okay, maybe we don't, let's say, we send out a bunch of emails, and we send out a bunch of invoices, or we mark a bunch of orders sale during the day, and we don't want to send out an invoice after every time we mark it sale. We want it just to wait to 9 o'clock at night and then have the system do it automatically so that no one forgets to do it, okay? If that's the case, what we would do is we would do the same thing. So we would, click on order macros. We'd click on new macro. And then I'm just going to call this one scheduled invoice email. Okay, so our trigger here, because we want to schedule it to run at a certain time, we're going to click on run this macro manually or on a schedule. So there's three options here. One says use the current macro. That would be if we're running it manually. But because we want it to affect multiple orders, the second option is use a SQL query. We could write a SQL query, but the third option is use the saved query. So let's say we want to create our query, and our query needs to return all of the orders marked sale today. So what we're going to do is we're going to say view modify query. Okay, and if you've ever used the Advanced Explorer, you'll realize that this screen is the exact same thing. So we're going to go to order criteria, we'll go to order dates, and we'll say sale date is today. So all orders where sale date is today. Okay, so we'll click OK here. So we created our query. So that query is going to return all of the orders that were marked sale today, all of the ones that we want the system to send emails to. Okay, so now that we have, the system's going to determine which orders it needs to send emails to, we're going to go to our Actions tab, and we're going to do the same thing. I'm going to go in, and I'm going to click on Report Macro, Add, And I'm going to get rid of that prompt to begin, because at 9 o'clock at night, hopefully no one is still sitting at their computer. Hopefully you're at home. Okay, so report macros. So we'll do the same thing we just did. We'll give it a name. Don't forget, I remember whenever I first started working with macros, I would always forget to change this option right here, and my macros would never run. And I would wonder why. Quick email. Don't forget that. We'll go through and we'll select our report. Order underscore invoice master 1. We'll go to the options tab. You'll put in who you want this email to be sent to. I'm just gonna fill in this one section right, who we want it to be sent to, and then so company's contact. Okay, company's accounting contact, and then let's go ahead and save this. Okay. Now what we need to do, so we created our macro, but now what we need to do is we need to schedule it to run at a certain time. So whenever we first came to Marketing Home, we selected macro setup, but down here at the bottom there's one that says schedule macro. Okay, let's click on that. So it's asking which employee do you want to put the macro action on. I'll go ahead, and it's always going to default to the logged in person. I'm logged in as a system administrator, so it'll default to my calendar. Description is going to be invoice, email invoice for orders marked sale today. Okay, sorry I misspelled it, but okay, so for our macro, we're going to go down and we're going to select our macro. So we named it schedule invoice macro. Okay, our reminder, because once again, no one's going to be at that computer, we really don't need a reminder. Okay, so this is going to be the starting date. So we want it to start tonight. We want it to run on the server in the background, and we want it to run at 9 o'clock p.m. every night. Okay, we also want to make this recurring so that tomorrow we create an activity for the next 2 months maybe. Okay, if I click on make recurring, you're going to get this box right here that says this activity needs to be saved before it can be made recurring. Save now, and we'll click yes here. Okay, and then recur every 1 day, weekdays only. Now, if we wanted it to run only during the week, if no one will ever mark an order sale on the weekend, then you could have this checked. I would probably uncheck this just in the rare case that someone does mark an order sale over the week. You won't forget to, the system will automatically send out that invoice. I'd probably uncheck that. That way it runs 7 days a week. And if they don't have any orders, it's just not going to do anything. That's it. So we want it to start today. We want to schedule ahead. Let's just say we want to schedule ahead a month. And we don't want to give it an end date. So what schedule ahead means is it's always going to schedule on the calendar. It's always going to schedule this macro on the calendar for 1 month from the current date. Okay? And there's no end date. So that just means it's going to keep scheduling. So as every day goes by, it's going to add an extra day. So it's always going to be scheduled out a month and no end date. Okay? One thing to remember about recurring macros is whenever I click, okay, so sorry, let me go back to this menu. It says, warning, exclude Saturdays and exclude Sundays are selected in system setup miscellaneous. Saturdays and Sundays will not be scheduled. This is just, there's a system setup option that asks if you want to exclude Saturdays and Sundays from your calendar. And it looks like we have that setting set to true, that we don't want people to be able to schedule stuff on Saturday and Sunday. So it's not letting me schedule on the Saturday and the Sunday. If we want to get around this, we could just go in System Setup and uncheck that option. Okay, so whenever we click OK here, Control is going to create an activity for today. Now, it's going to take, this is one thing that, that kind of confuses some people. To cut down on the amount of work that your slip has to do, is it only checks for new recurring activities it's either 4 or 6 hours. So whenever I click OK and I go to my activity manager, you may not see, well, more than likely you won't see the activities for, okay, hold on, let me go to my calendar. because we scheduled it on the system administrator's calendar, I need to make sure I'm looking at their calendar. So we'll click on administrator. We'll uncheck everybody else. That way we're not overloaded with calendars. Okay, so notice down here at the bottom, email, invoice for orders marked sale today, and you only see it for today. However, we just scheduled it out for a month in advance. You're not going to see the following days until the server goes and looks for new recurring activities. So it's every 4 or 6 hours that the system automatically does that. So at most we'll have to wait, it's either 4 or 6, I'm not sure. At most we'll have to wait 4 or 6 hours before those activities. Typically what I do is I just wait till I come in the next morning and I look at my activities and they're going to be there. So you'll see one of these activities for the next month. Okay, that's just a stipulation with recurring activities. Okay, so that macro had to do with sending out invoices whenever order is marked sale. Now, if we take that example and so there's 3 different macros that customers often ask about. One is the one we just talked about. The second one is sending out monthly statements to customers. And if you look at it, sending out a monthly statement is going to be very similar to the scheduled invoice macro. There's going to be actually 2 main differences. The first main difference is that the query that we created here, let's go ahead and clone this. Oh, sorry, no. This would actually be, sorry, there's 3 main differences. The first one is that because we want to send this, we don't want to send it for every outstanding order because one company might have 20 outstanding orders, and we don't want to send them the exact same report 20 times, once for each order. We want to send each company one report that has all of their orders on it. So the first thing we'd have to do is create a company macro. So we would do new macro here. We'd enter in our name. We would want this to probably run, most people whenever they do this macro, the statement macro, they want it to run either at the beginning of the month, maybe the 15th of the month, maybe the last day of the month. I'll typically do the 1st of the month just to make it easy. So we want to schedule it on the activity manager. And we'll use a saved query. So we'll go to View Modify Criteria. Okay, and we want it to return all companies where the company has an order with a balance outstanding greater than $0, and the order is in the sale status. Okay, so we want it, the list of companies that we want it to return are going to be all companies where companies have an order where all the following is true. The balance outstanding is greater than 0 and the order is marked sale. Remember, you have to have both of those because you don't want to send out a statement to someone who has who owes you money but the order's in the WIP status because they don't really owe you that yet. Or you don't want to send out a statement to everyone who has an order in sale because some orders they may have already paid for. They may have put a 100% deposit on it. So there's no outstanding balance. So all companies where they have orders that have a balance outstanding and the order's marked sale. So we'll click OK here. Okay, so the first difference between those 2 macros is that we need to do a company macro. The second difference is that we need to change our query. The third difference is that instead of sending out the invoice report, we want to send out the statement report. So if we go down to Report Macro Crystal, and we go to System Reports, we're going to go to All Account Statement 01. That's the report you use for your statements. And then after that, you're going to schedule it just like you did, except where we scheduled it every day for send the emails, we send the invoices, we're going to schedule this once a month. So it's the exact same process, except we're going to schedule it once a month.